Hi guys, I'm Jonathan from the i5 podcast team that I host alongside my friend Jim, back again with another video. If you like what you hear, please hit the trinity of the like, share and subscribe. Now that's out of the way, on to the topic at hand. I said in an earlier video that Rishi Sunak's cabinet would be a good point of attack for the opposition, as it really seems to be a big weakness for Sunak. It also seems to have many ways in which it can be exploited, one of which seems to be the scandals in his cabinet. In fact, the strategy from the press and Labour seems to be to make the scandals involving Sunak's cabinet members a trope that's as frequent as chapters 4 to 6 levels in horror games being set in insane asylums. Probably not a coincidence either, as this is West Minster and the latest resignation, who also happens to be a creepy little dweeb who has both the appearance of someone out of a Carry-On film and that of the disturbing puppet from the Goosebumps Night of the Living Dummy books. There's quite a bit to say in this one, so let's start with what's actually happened. Williamson, one of Sunak's cabinet ministers, formerly a Johnson yes-man who destroyed the credibility of a year group's exams and results, and would subsequently have to resign because of that. I mean, this was hardly surprising, as when he was challenged by journalists like Susanna Reid, the man never actually showed any ability to do the job. Yes, he was part of Johnson's cabinet that produced such hits as Randy Matt Hancock, who had to resign ultimately because his right hand saw more of his assistant's arse than the office furniture. Amazingly, to get back to Williamson, he actually had an earlier resignation back when he was a defence secretary under Theresa May. And speaking of tropes, he had to resign for leaking information. There must be some kind of achievement for pulling the hat-trick. Either that or the guy has more lives than fucking Mario. So why has he stood down this time? Bullying. It's been leaked that he sent abusive messages to Chief Whip Wendy Morton. I mean, I'm surprised. She resigned and came back as well. Apparently you'd think they'd get along because they have things in common. Effectively, Wendy Morton didn't pick Williamson to attend the monarch's funeral, and it would seem he wasn't happy about it. In fact, he allegated that those who supported Johnson were being excluded from attending. It was, he texted, very poor and sends a very clear message that members of the Privy Council, who were not favoured by Truss, were being deliberately excluded. This looked very shit, Williamson added. Also, don't forget, I know how this works, so don't pussy me about, he wrote. Another read, well, let's see how many times you fuck us all over. There is a price for everything. I mean, that's a threat right there. If that wasn't bad enough, it was also revealed that he told a civil servant to slit their throat. This is extremely abusive and downright unstable, with how graphic it is. And it's just right he resign. I mean, Williamson even gave a conference speech earlier in his career and delivered it in this really creepy demeanour, which gave the impression he kills small animals in his spare time. I'm not saying he does, he just came across as that. It would be comedic if not for the fact that the guy had power, and that's the point. He was given power. And because of this, problems are arising for Sunak as a common theme with Sunak is, did you know this before you put him in the cabinet? Now Sunak has said no, and then expressed great sadness that he accepted Williamson's resignation. Yeah, great sadness, this guy. It should also be pointed out that Sunak also continued to refer to Williamson as Right Honourable. Not only did this leave him wide open to criticism from Starmer, but it does lead to further questions of whether this title should be removed from MPs after they resign for incidents like this. Now there was a second incident, and that is an incident from the charismatic black hole that is Dominic Raab, the current Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, who was also having allegations levelled at him for bullying. In reports from The Guardian, from Raab's earliest stint in the role of Justice Secretary under Johnson, he was quite the bully, to the extent that staff were offered routes out of the department when they were told he was coming back. If that wasn't enough, department chiefs held a meeting during which 15 staff were taken to a room where department chiefs acknowledged that some were anxious about his behaviour. It's been reported that some apparently broke down into tears. The Guardian claims that Raab is very demeaning in the way he talks to people, while the point is made that while this may not be bullying, it's still unprofessional. There is also reports of him blowing up at civil servants in meetings. It's an abuse of power. With media sites on Raab, it really feels like the cabinet are being picked off one by one and letting their scandals stack in order to bring down Sunak. In fact, while writing this, more abuse allegations have been leaked about Raab in relation to his stint as Brexit Secretary. With Sunak, how many times can he claim he didn't know about any of this prior to hiring them? Additionally, this really shows a few things in relation to the state of the West Minster Bubble. Bullying is systemic. In fact, there are a lot of sins that are systemic in relation to abusive behaviour. We've seen this in the past. Former Speaker John Burker was banned from Parliament for complaints which included shouting at people and imitating them in conversation. There was also quite a graphic incident at a dinner party which was a black tie affair. During this, a female climate protester stood up and began asking questions of government officials. Mark Field, a Foreign Office cabinet minister who was in attendance, stood up, and his first instinct, his words by the way, was to grab her by the neck and pin her against the wall. If this isn't graphic enough, he then held her by the back of the neck and escorted her from the event. It was disgusting to watch, but it shows the level of entitlement and belief that they are above the law in relation to what they can do to other people and how much control they have over them. These are just a couple of the examples of abuse. To further reinforce this, party unity is built upon favours and threats. Gavin Williamson said this himself during his Voldemort impression during a conference speech when he was a whip. Hell, even his leaving picture from his most recent resignation of a spider on a red book to indicate what he knows and what he could leak is a threat. He was only given a knighthood to keep him quiet after Johnson told him to resign. But to give an example from Labour, the main character from the thick of it is based on Alistair Campbell, bullying and threatening to maintain party unity. Hell, we saw this to a new extreme a few weeks ago during the Liz Truss fight night a day or two before she resigned. Seriously, MPs actually got manhandled during this night. I'll link our video on that in the description as it goes into more detail about it specifically. There are also examples of abuse in the political press. For example, the Talk TV political editor, Kate McCann, back when she was a Sky News correspondent, was caught on camera being very demeaning to her camera team. It wasn't quite bullying, but like what Dominic Raab was accused of, it was very unprofessional as it was really demeaning. Kay Burley at Sky News, who has a reputation for shouting at people and has been in HR a few times for it, and also going for the throat. I'm afraid I can't go into any more detail than that as it's not actually allowed. Adam Bolton, another example, who has a reputation for being nasty and abusive to women who are more intelligent than him, on air. Honestly, I've seen it. He actually told a Republican lawyer that she was a disgusting person just after he said it was for the media to decide who the next president was. All she said was, Al Gore challenged his election result. That was enough to set him off. Calling her a disgusting person was completely unprovoked, but enough about Adam Bolton's inferiority complex around attractive and intelligent women. Whatever your political views, none of what I've just said is acceptable, and borderlines being abusive. My point is, even in the political press this goes on, and shows it's a systemic problem in Westminster culture. You have people who believe they are the ruling class and treat people like crap, who would have guessed. But it's not something that should be allowed in this day and age. However, just to add to this, there was a recent BBC interview between Nagaman Shetty and Charlotte Nichols in which whisper networks were discussed. Basically an unofficial list of sex pests and dangerous MPs which numbered about 40. And individuals are told to stay away from them over actually reporting them. This is beyond disgusting. Furthermore, in an interview with Beth Rigby, the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, responded to allegations of staffers being made to clean floors, amongst other things, was effectively to say it wasn't his problem and recommended people use toothless organisations with extremely long investigation periods. Evidently, he doesn't want to ruffle any feathers as he's determined to get that House of Lords position. And this is the point. These people, ranging from bullies to predators, don't get dealt with. Everyone is aware of what they are and what they do, so the culture becomes, don't rat on anyone, keep yourself out of danger, and start doing favours in exchange for career advancements, including not reporting anyone on the whisper list. Ash Sarkar defined this perfectly as a transactional culture. It's favour for favour, and I find it highly unlikely that Nagaman Shetty didn't know about these networks. Again, just an opinion. In fact, I find it absurd that the press didn't know about any of this, and it's all of a sudden a revelation to them. The nature of the lobby is access, which is part of the transactional culture. There are all kinds of sins being carried out in Westminster, and lobby journalists won't address them until they either have to, or the story becomes attention-grabbing enough for them. More often than not, lobby journalists refuse to investigate things because they might lose their access. Some lobby journalists will overlook things and give softball questions and interviews in exchange for access as well. Or even government jobs like the head of government communication, which has recruited its last 2 occupiers from the press. Hell, with some of what the Westminster lobby know about and have turned a blind eye to, at what point do they cease being a journalist and become an accessory that have withheld information from the police? Again, this is just an opinion, but I make the point that the bullying is systemic in the bubble and as a whole, and in its culture. With this culture embedded in the press as well, it will never get resolved or dealt with in an effective way, not as long as journalists are bragging about their contact books and the politicians who they are connected to, emphasising that the press are part of this transactional culture in Westminster and their journalism is based upon it. None of this, however, is new. However, leaks are coming out about Sunak's cabinet one at a time. Starmer, in a recent PMQs, even went so far as to say that Sunak is scared of his cabinet. I can believe this. Who knows what they have on him, and who knows what they've done in the past that he has overlooked when it comes to hiring them. Remember, Sunak stated his resignation was because of Johnson hiring Chris Pincher, so this really is a weakness for him. And for whatever reason as to why these leaks about his cabinet are being focused on by the press and the opposition, I mean, even if this does cause Sunak to resign, it exposes just how bad Westminster culture actually is. One thing I will say, the lettuce is being called on as an opponent for Elon Musk, and now an MP is heckling to bring the lettuce back against Sunak. If it gets these victories, the lettuce is going to be the next Bill Goldberg. I'm Jonathan, one half of the i5 podcast team that I host alongside my co-host Jim. If you liked what you heard, please hit the like, the bell, and the subscribe button. If you agreed or disagreed or have anything to add, please don't hesitate to leave any comments. This is for discussion after all. Thank you for listening.